Okay. Hello, everybody. I believe we are live, but I still hear the countdown stuff. Do you guys hear that? No? Okay. So it's just on mine. That's fine. Okay. So welcome to episode 1 of the CMA Panel podcast. So we are here to discuss this CMDB and CSDM framework, also with a panel of well-respected CMAs from all over the world. So we're just going to go through and do a bit of an introduction. This is a live interactive session, so feel free to say hello and post questions in the chat. Otherwise, we can start moving through and discussing stuff on our own. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us. So first up, we have, I believe we've got Gautam from Gautam Shikar. Did I say that correctly, please?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so thank you for joining us, and go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Thanks, Chris, and nice to meet you all. So this is Gautam Shekhar. I'm a CMA, as you also know. I've been working in the ServiceNow space for close to 10 to 12 years now. And I lead the practice of risk management and the advisory within the APAC region of Tadara. So yeah, that's a very quick introduction about me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. And Abhishek?
Hey everyone, good morning. I'm Abhishek Srivastava. Recently got my CMA in May 2024. I have around 18 years of experience in IT and pretty much the same experience, kind of a decade-old experience on the ServiceNow platform, working with multiple Fortune 500 companies and helping them achieve the best from the ServiceNow CMDB. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And Greg Mest.
Hi, everyone. I've been working in IT since 1995, hence the white hair. Started at ServiceNow in their professional services in 2010. I was in the first CMA cohort and got the CMA in 2019. And I've been running my own business for a little over 3.5 years. And my primary areas of focus are, other than, I feel like you don't need to say ITSM anymore. That's just redundant. But CSM, integrations, and custom app development. So happy to be here.
And last but certainly not least, Patrick, is it Latella? Did I get that?
Yep. Yes, it is. Yep. Thanks, Chris. Hi, everybody. My name is Patrick Latella. I've been in the ServiceNow space for 9 years. Along with Abhishek, I'm a newly minted CMA, just passed my board in March of this year. And I lead our customer service delivery for our ServiceNow practice at Datavale. And so like many CMAs, my responsibilities run the gamut, and very excited to be here.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so while we're getting to the comments in a bit, this discussion is centered around the CMDB and CSDM. So if someone has got anything that they want to say on a recent project that they've covered, or maybe discuss CSDM 5.0, we can open with that.
I would like to start with, so one of my customers, one of IBM's customers, they are having this ServiceNow platform for a long while. They were one of the early adopters in the retail sector. And their CMDB is all over the place. It is 2024, and still they do not have automated discovery filling in their CMDB. So as part of so it's an IBM initiative as part of and we call it the golden CMDB IBM has. So as part of our analysis of their CMDB, we went in and we are trying to work with them to get their CMDB up to the level where they would start utilizing the CSDM framework, because there are a lot of other applications which want to connect. And also they had a lot of mergers. Now these small companies which they are acquiring also have their ServiceNow environments and other applications which are using the other CMDBs. So how do they come in? And they were like, their platform owner was like, hey, IBM, can you come in and help us like real quick? And then we are in the process of helping them. So it is a good place learning with all of you about your experiences, so that I can go back, take the information from here and go back and help my customers. So that is a very recent one where I'm really scratching my head a lot. So
So, what was their business driver around not having the CMDB auto populated? Now, I know Discovery is a great tool for that, but I know there's others as well.
So, uh, well, actually, they had the ServiceNow platform set up a long time, and then it kept on passing from generations to generations. And none of the leaders in the organizations, they were like VPs and senior VPs who were the platform owners. So
Mhm.
they didn't really realize how the CMDB could help them with a service aware kind of thing, so that their business is aware of that. Whenever a business service goes down, their technology teams get to know, okay, here it is going down, or proactively there are alerts sent out, so they were never aware of it. Recently, when IBM started supporting their environment, that's where I got involved in. And then I saw, hey, you are not utilizing what you have today, you're paying for it, you start utilizing it. And they had all
Mhm.
the automation engine, they had the service mapping license, but they're not utilizing it. It is ServiceNow, they do a great job in
Mhm.
helping customers by utilizing their licenses, that okay, you have this, but there needs to be a partner who should enable them how to use it. So that's how we involve them.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. Greg?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I.
So I was. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
sorry, Greg, you go. That's fine.
So I was gonna echo the first thing that he said, which is, in the 14 years working with this, most customer environments are kind of a hodgepodge, right? You've got a CMDB that's made up of imports and other discovery tools, and if you're lucky, you know, discovery itself, right? And then the other thing is, the CSDM journey, that's kind of as old as the CMDB, because in the early days there was the concept of business services, and I'm sure most people who have been involved with this for a long time have been in these sort of heated discussions about what is a business service, what constitutes a business service, and what does that actually mean, and what do we do with it. And so, from the very simple idea of just defining those things, we've now come up to then there was service mapping, right? And now we're into the CSDM model, and they all sort of tie together. And the idea and the concepts make a lot of sense. It's like, what do we as IT deliver to the business? How are we delivering on it? Are there issues underlying that need to be addressed? All those sorts of things. Um, what's interesting to me is there's the kind of the theoretical idea of CSDM, which I think it makes a lot of sense. But in practicality, how do we get it implemented and how do we get it maintained? And I'm thinking particularly when you don't have a new or a wholly ServiceNow solutioned environment, right? So if you've got service mapping, if you've got discovery, doing CSDM is probably not a huge ordeal. But if you don't, and there's a lot of reasons companies don't necessarily go with that solution, doing the CSDM model is kind of sometimes a hard sell, because you've got to prove that the amount of time and energy and resources they need to put into doing a CSDM is worth it. What is the ROI on having a CSDM? So those are both the sort of the journey and then the practical challenges that I've seen companies face. And I don't know that there's necessarily answers, and hopefully maybe we can talk about some of these things. But that's just been my experience, kind of at a high level.
Yeah, and that's a great sort of experience, Greg. So I've been doing CSDM roadmap and discovery for a few customers even before doing the project, just to help them understand what value do they get, how quickly do they get, and what stage of CSDM should they really follow. Right now, based on my personal experience, and we're doing this for the past, I think, 3 to 4 years, predominantly in the CSDM version 3 and version 4, and obviously looking forward for the new exciting things in version 5 as well. But what has worked for me based on a couple of implementations of CSDM for different type of industry sectors is that following the stages that the CSDM white paper recommends. As an example, CSDM version 4 has crawl, walk, run, and fly, and it has what tables should you focus on when you're following ECHs. But personally, in my experience, we felt we can't just follow that as a Bible, because different customers have different sort of priorities, different infra setup, and you also have a lot of different sort of industries have different ways of working. So, for example, implementing a CSDM, maybe a walk for an IT organization, is different to a banking, or is different to a retail. So, what we have done is we sort of provide our own flavor of the CSDM stages to the customer, saying, in phase one, why don't you sort of do this, which could not exactly match with the CSDM sort of white paper that has. And the main reason behind that is, what if the customers don't have application portfolio management? So they might not be able to use information objects, as an example, right? Similarly, what if the customers don't have service mapping? Can they survive with the manual service maps, where they just create some of the records within the application service table and they can use it, right? So that's where we sort of ended up, and the best logical decision that we found was that, okay, so let's stick on to what works for the customer, and obviously we'll leverage all the best practices that ServiceNow recommends from the CSDM perspective, and most important being the foundation, right? Like you said, Greg, if they don't have discovery and service mapping, so their application service layer may not be 100% represented in terms of how CSDM proposes. Similarly, if they don't have APM, then their architecture, enterprise architecture space, and the APM space will not be represented. So, yeah, I think after a few years of implementing and learning from what we have done, and we went live with one of the recent customers in Australia, and I think that was one of the very few customers where we made the CI, the servers and service offering fields mandatory on the incident form, which was one of the selling factors for us. And the service offering was derived based on the service. So I think that's what I've found out, and I'm really looking forward for CSDM 5. I see there's a lot of changes there. But yeah, so the sneak peek seems to be quite exciting.
That's great. Oh, go ahead, Greg. And then we have
sorry, I just want to follow up with a quick question to the panel, which is,
Sure.
if you are working with customers who aren't doing discovery and or service mapping, but are attempting to do, define things like application portfolios and services and whatnot, is there value in that? Like, if you can't connect your actual physical and logical devices into your service layer, is there value in actually doing the service piece? That's one of the questions I struggle with, and I'm not sure I have an answer to yet.
Well, the typical architect answer is it depends. So I'm going through that journey right now with a client that does have very limited discovery. They're not discovering everything, just really a small subset of the infrastructure, and we're still starting the CSDM journey. The reason we decided to do that was due to an issue. And people didn't know what one piece of infrastructure, the impact it had on the whole organization. So enter in, let's connect it, let's map out all of the critical services that we have. And that gave us the incident, problem, and change management reporting we needed. And then let's flesh out the CMDB and then go back and do more CSDM. So it's kind of back and forth. But without that critical view, they really struggled to resolve an issue as quickly as they could. And they didn't know that it really would impact this whole enterprise piece of software. So that's kind of how that got sold. And that's one of a bit of frustration that I have with it. It's never worth it to invest in security until there's an incident. And then it's like, oh, suddenly we have all this budget.
Sure.
So we're trying to stay out of the news that way, and even the internal company news on these issues. But go ahead. We'll do one more follow-up, and then we got a few questions.
Yep. There's a question from Anila.
Oh, yes.
And, she says that is CMDB or discovery expensive? I mean, expensive is a subjective thing, but when it comes down to saving the cost of, how about you discover an issue which is going to happen in one of your services before the time it occurs? Suppose a database is going to go down, which is serving your external customers, and you, because of your CMDB mapping and discovery, you get informed. Your IT teams, the technical teams, get informed well before time. They take action, and you save, I don't know how many dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. At that point of time, we will realize that it is not expensive. And just to touch on that, see, discovery, we have to spend time and effort in doing proper discovery, proper configuring the discovery items, whatever your discovery templates are there, and all those things. So you have to spend time and efforts, and the platform owners should be able to do that. So I would not say that it is expensive, but the ultimate fruit which you are going to get out of implementing the discovery in proper manner for leading practices, and so that will be giving you a good outcome.
I mean, if I'm paying for it, I think it's expensive, but the value's there. That's really where we have to build that business case, say this is, yes, what it costs to purchase, subscribe, license, then implement, and then maintain. And then after that, is it worth it? And if you have a team that's doing this through Excel, it is very easy to make that business case. So yes, the CMDB, even by itself, while the licensing is free, when you have a pro product, any pro product, you can use your CMDB as well. The maintenance of it and the setting it up and managing it can be costly to do. And that's why we want to automate as much as we can. We've got another question here from Naveen. How does having CMDB help with incident, problem, and change?
CSDM.
Yeah, CSDM. Sorry.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to, I'll open up the answer for that question, which I'm sure we all have some input, but I also wanted to kind of circle back to two things that just got said around the cost of this and really that ability to change the conversation into the value that you're going to get from it, that both Chris, you and Abhishek both just mentioned. I have 4 different customers right now that we're talking about CMDB, we're talking about CSDM, and I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is that definition. People get a little confused around these concepts, and one of the things that I find very beneficial is to take it back to the basics, set it back to even the initial pieces of the roadmap towards flushing out a service-aware CMDB, and really that idea of setting a direction. What are the goals that we want to get out of this? So Abhishek, you were talking about this customer that has this completely blown out CMDB. I have a customer that's like that. So how do you steer them back towards a focus? And I think the key is talking about, well, what do we want to get out of this? Where can we find the incremental improvements that we can get out of this? And that kind of ties directly into this question around the CSDM. So again, for the person who put that question in, I think it's important to understand that the CMDB is the collection of configuration items and the mapping of your components that make up your critical business infrastructure. The CSDM is the way that those artifacts are organized, and they tie in to what Chris was saying around incident, problem, and change, because they give you something to tie those issues to. And by tying an issue to it, you're able to then get ahead of critical outages by preventing them. You're able to snuff them out quicker because you can really tie one incident to many by seeing the pattern that you might have against your CMDB. And that really, again, I think is a key focus for the CMDB journey and that understanding of the difference and the correlation between CMDB and CSDM.
Yeah, and just to add on that as well, I think to take an example, the difference between having an incident raised with CMDB and without CMDB is that obviously with CSDM and without CSDM is that it's 12:20 in the morning. So sorry, but yeah. So obviously the service center views that what we get out of the CSDM right now. We have seen a lot of change requests being raised over a period of time, but what we don't understand is what are the services that are impacted. So that is a view that we are looking at, right? Even same for the incident. So let's say we patch a server and something goes wrong. So what is the impact of that incident? So by the time you figure out, without having CSDM in place, you would have spent maybe 2 or 3 hours just figuring out what is the impact of this. But if you have CSDM in place, you know the affected services or impacted services, right? You also know what are the service offerings that is affected and who takes care of those service offerings from both technical side and from the management side. So I think having the service-centric view, and we have seen this for a lot of customers who have onboarded into CSDM, right? That they can easily understand who need to send out an email, whom should we call when something goes wrong. But whereas without the CSDM or service-centric view, it's really hard to figure that out. And that's the reason why we have different domains covered within the CSDM model. You have the technical domain just to help from the technical perspective. You have stakeholders, business stakeholders who need to be informed. At the same time, you also have enterprise architects who needs to keep an eye off what's happening in that space. The second point there is, I think, even the ServiceNow is shaping the other products, like not just the ITOM, right? The ITAM, GRC, and a lot of other products of ServiceNow are actually tweaked in terms of how the CSDM tables are designed. So it's very important that we start this journey as early as we can, so that we are always ahead of what ServiceNow is doing, and we adapt to the new features of ServiceNow platform as well.
So just give you one real world example on that, and then Greg, you can come in. So let's say you're using your CSDM to track everything that's on one Windows server, and that Windows server hosts multiple virtual machines, and each of those virtual machines is tied to a specific service. If that one server goes down, now I know instantly all of the services that are impacted, and if I have all of my foundational data populated, who's responsible, who owns the service, I can immediately automate notifications out to all of these people to say, this server is down, it's impacting this other service that you have. Please know that we're working on it. And then you can automate all of the updates after that as well. So that's a great example that we're currently going through with one client as well. So Greg, I think you had something.
I was just, so I agree in terms of, knowledge of who should be informed and how they should be informed and whatnot. I think those are all practical things in your I'll just call it your ITSM suite or issue resolution applications. But I think the main benefit on CSDM and those is really more to management and executive level, which is visibility for the organization to understand what's happening underneath those services. Those things that we are offering to the business or to customers. Okay, how are we delivering on them, or how are we managing them? Which ones are costing us the most? I mean, that's huge, right? To be able to say, look, we've got these suite of 20 services, but this one is taking up half of our budget. Why is that? Now you have that visibility, and I think that's the main driving selling point of having a robust CSDM in place.
Yes, definitely. So we got a real world question now as well about how do we associate SLAs to different service and service offerings from the same vendor? Has anybody done a complex SLA implementation?
Do we think?
Yes.
So is that talking? I'm assuming that is SLAs against an incident that's been raised against a particular service and service offering.
Yes.
To sort of maybe quickly high level, I mean, there are definitely many ways that you can configure your SLAs. There are a condition builder in there that would enable you to set up all of the various criteria. You can set it against vendors, and that would enable you to then have your SLAs be very granular for your needs. That would be my take on that one.
So are you saying then, Patrick, you would have many SLA definitions created?
Well, I'd want to see the whole picture. I'm reluctant to solution on the fly, as I'm sure we all are. But the high level requirement, how do we associate SLAs? I think it boils down to the needs of the business. If it's manageable and it brings the value, which again, what SLAs are for, then potentially, yes, we would go with quite a few definitions.
And also,
oh yeah, go ahead, Abhishek.
Yeah, and also in the application portfolio management application, we have there is a place where you could associate your SLAs with your service offerings and applications your vendor provides. So you can have all the applications listed down there, and with that you can do real-time SLAs. There is one SLA application on the ServiceNow platform, which is you describe those application, your SLA records, and link them with incident problems and changes. Those are for the records. And those records refer to the CMDB, a CI in the CMDB. There is another way for your service offering, which is provided by your application portfolio module. So you can define your applications, discover your service offerings in that, and the applications under that, and configure your SLAs.
So we have done slightly different for one of our customers here, and their infra is almost 80 to 90% managed by their vendors, right? And it's very important that, obviously, if what if there's a P1 issue? So you could either have vendors who supports the service, sorry, that application, like ServiceNow as an example, right? Or it could be some of these third-party providers, right? So for example, it could be an implementation partner who's providing the service for that application, but that application is owned by a different company altogether. So we have defined service commitments against the service offerings and the business service offerings, to be more specific. And the main reason behind that is we are making sure that what has been agreed as a part of the contract has been met by those vendors. And secondly, what if there's a P1 issue? So whom should we reach out to? So all those have been defined within the commitments, service commitments. Now we sort of had a phase 2 journey there, where we could also sort of use the service portfolio management to do that, but we just sticked on to the service commitments. And the other problem that we had with normal SLAs was we don't want to give access to all the vendors. I mean, we don't want to give access to those vendors into the ServiceNow platform, right? And at the same time, we don't have to complicate by going to the CSM journey and defining whole different complex scenarios. But service commitments was one of the ways. Specifically, I think that's what ServiceNow recommends in their product documentation, to tie that to an offering and then track the SLAs as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Naveen. Those last two questions were for Naveen Kumar. So having the SDM helping an incident, and then the SLA question. So let's move on to the latest question, and then we're going to jump back afterwards towards that. So how is that RM_product table related or used compared to the CMDB model table? So I pulled the documentation up, but I didn't want to take up anybody else's answer if they want to speak on that. Or are we all Googling it? So that's fair. So this is a great thing to note out, is that I didn't know how they differentiated each other. So that RM_product table is used in the release management module, and it's tied to the agile development piece as well. So that's how that relates to just those pieces. So am I releasing something, and am I tying that release to a product? It is optional, and you can see the documentation on the doc site that covers that, versus the CMDB model table, which is used to unify your models, and then you can apply them differently throughout your entire CMDB.
Yeah, I think for the purposes of this discussion, if
yes,
you're using CMDB model, that's what you want to be using for CMDB and CSDM.
Yeah, it's true.
Right. Okay, so let's jump back now. So Karthik, thank you for asking that question. We're going to jump back now to Anila's original question. Sorry for kind of glossing over that one. So I'll open this up to everybody. What is the baseline that we would use to start populating the CMDB manually? And then the follow-up question is, do we just also jump in or start with discovery?
Yep. So what I've seen in typical implementations, and these are real life scenarios, Anila, what we do is whenever we are setting up an environment for any customer, we would want to start with manually uploading the CIs if they have a load of it. So customers have different CMDBs. Some of them maintain it in Excel sheets, some of them maintain it in SharePoints and whatnot. So whenever you're starting the environment, start with manually uploading the data onto the CMDB. And as and when you mature with CMDB, because your implementation takes time. You don't do a CMDB and discovery at once, right? So as you are maturing in phases, once you're done with manually uploading the CIs and populating the CMDB, then we start planning for our implementations with discovery, and then comes the CSDM.
Yeah, and it also depends on what CMDB elements does the company or the customer wants, right? Discovery can do a lot of things. So discovery can discover Windows servers, Linux, and it can discover a lot of things. But what is the main purpose of loading the data? What data are we loading at the first place? So that's an important question that we'll have to ask first, because we could do a discovery implementation for 3 months, but if that doesn't connect the dot for the customer whenever there's an incident or whenever there's a change, then I don't think there's really a value out of it, right? And secondly, obviously the CMDB, I don't think it's ever complete. You can't have a completed CMDB project. You can't just wash your hands and walk away, right? So there's always a continuous sort of improvement phase within the whole CMDB slash CSDM journey. So to start with, I think it depends if it's a greenfield implementation where customer is new to service now, they don't have anything. So in that case, yes, like Abhishek said, we can start off with some manual loads, but more important thing is the governance. So how do we make sure the data that is there in the CMDB is up to date? So whether you could have reports that says if the CMDB is not up, if that CI is not updated in the last 30 or 60 days, then take an action against that. So yeah, so it really depends on the use cases, the priorities, and secondly, which one is easier. So is it easier to integrate with SCCM or any other tools apart from discovery just to solve the purpose, or is discovery the only solution depending on the CIs that they want to load?
Yeah, and I would say if it's truly,
go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, it's a quick one. If it's truly greenfield, or if they truly have no CMDB tool currently, the discovery discussion becomes much easier, and that is truly the way to go if you can convince them to go that way. It makes this journey orders of magnitude more simple. Go ahead, Patrick.
I was just going to say that again. I think to both of those points, I think keeping it simple and remembering what the goal is. I think those are the key things that I try to drive home with my customers is what are we looking to achieve? Let's get it into a manageable and tangible objective, something that is achievable. There's no use setting some unbelievably lofty goal. I mean, it might be an overarching multi-year goal that the executive leadership might have, but when it gets down into the weeds, we need to set achievable chunks and move forward in phases. And I think the discussions around which way to go have everything to do with, well, what are we looking to achieve?
Excellent. Okay, so just going to zoom back to another question from Karthik. So they say, without ITAM, SPM, or vendor management, CSDM can't be in the fly mode fully, or the fly stage. Do you agree or disagree?
The bigger question is, have we set up a foundation for us? Because it all depends. And whenever I'm talking to my customers, I tell them that, okay, I tell them in an analogy kind of way that consider CMDB as your library. And then how you put the books in the library, the kind of the fiction books in one area, the newspapers in one area, and kind of things. That's how we load the CSDM. So the bigger question comes here is, have you already done your foundation right in the CSDM? And then we have to move forward. Now, talking about specifically about ITAM, service portfolio, or is the strategic portfolio management, ITAM has discovery in that. So first of all, you have to make your discovery schedules right and see whether your foundation is established. And then we have to go to the fly stage. And the fly stage is when you start talking about your business services, about the costs, how you are saving your costs in that. So I would start with foundation first, and then we'll think about we can go to the fly stage.
And I think to directly answer the question as well, I think you can definitely go to the fly without those three products of service now. And this could be a bit unpopular, right? But I'm just going through the CSDM white paper, at least the version 4. So one of the key things that in the fly stage is you have all the boxes covered with different elements to that. And most of them are actually core tables within ServiceNow: business service offerings, technical service offerings. SDLC is anyway optional, which I'll skip for now. But the only thing which we may not be able to get is the information objects, which is again a part of the APM product. But like I said in the start of the session as well, if we have to go through the books of CSDM and if you follow that fly, then yes, we may be able to achieve maybe 90% or close to 80% without having all the products in place. But if we go to the industry vertical, there's a lot of articles that says what is fly for a banking sector versus what is fly or run for a retail sector and so on. So if you go with that sort of methodology, I think going to a fly model is definitely not a showstopper, but having those additional products will definitely support the journey of CSDM. But I don't think that should be a showstopper to get to the fly stage. And there's always a continuous evolving of the data, right? So people, when they onboard new applications, they'll have to make sure the proper linkage to CSDM is done. So that's how generally it is.
Yeah, and one thing that I think is key about the fly phase is it's when you're able to offer out to the business through the catalog, your service catalog, options for interacting with your CMDB. So you may have pieces of your CMDB that actually make it to the fly phase before other pieces do. And it always ties back to, what are these high level objectives that we're looking to achieve. You may have a part of your CMDB journey that is simpler and easier to achieve and easier to move through the phases of your journey faster than others. I do want to chime in real quick on Glenn's comment around governance, and with the triple exclamation points, I couldn't agree more. One of the keys with the whole journey and everything that we may talk about, ultimately, one of the things that we have to make sure the customer understands is that it's their data. And when we set up for data governance and an understanding that it's a responsibility on the organization to understand and invest time and resources into their own CMDB themselves. And this is a challenge I run into where a customer may think, oh, great, can you just run my CMDB for me? And it's a challenge because really you need to bring in those key stakeholders internally and people who will know how to review the data and know what's valid and what's not. So the governance piece, I think, is key, and I'm glad it made it into the conversation.
Definitely, yeah. I'm a huge fan of governance, and we could talk all day, or I could at least, around that. Another piece, just to piggyback on to what you had said there, Patrick, was that the fly stage is really just about tying those business services to the business capabilities, and then you, expose them through the catalog to the business users. So you absolutely could get to that fly stage. Even if you had to manually do it, you could still get there. A recent experience we just had was a certificate expired. And this did it on a Friday, and it was a long weekend, and the service went down all weekend. And it was a critical business service. So enter in, hey, we need to manage certificates in the CMDB, and now we need to also tie them to business services because we're not sure exactly what this certificate does. So like you said, we can't own your data. I can quarterback it. I can quarterback your CMDB for you, but your organization is going to need people to sit down and agree, I'm responsible for change. I care if this certificate needs to be refreshed or renewed, or I know, and then I'm a business stakeholder on that, so I want to understand that. And then who actually goes and procures the certificate? And that's the big question that I'm currently going through right now with this client is, who is the one when the certificate expired that went and procured the new one? Okay, well, now guess who's listed as the support group for that CI? And they don't have certificate management, that tool within ServiceNow. It's a great product. We're trying to manage about 53 certificates right now, so it was a bit of a sledgehammer for, it was a heavy hand or a tank to kind of come in and do a smaller job. I think we've got, so thanks again, Glenn. That's, governance. Oh, great. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to hopefully put a bow on that question, I think, the data, the key data that comes out of those processes, ITAM and SPM, and those need to exist to fly. Do you have to use ServiceNow's vendor management product to have that data? Not necessarily. It's ServiceNow would tell you it's going to be easier if you use theirs. They're in the business of selling products, right? But ultimately, it's the data, the KPIs, the metrics that come out of those processes. I think those you need to be able to get to get to the fly phase of CSDM. So hopefully that
Awesome.
answers that question.
Yeah, it does. We have another question from, I believe, Karthik, maybe. Can we have business service offerings without having business services?
I don't think you can have both architecturally as well as logically, because service offerings are your breakdown of your services. And secondly, I think without, yeah, I think the straight answer is I don't think you can have service offerings just without having any business services. Maybe you can have a service and then you can define the offerings later depending on your journey. But yeah, service offering needs to be tied to a service, whether it's business or technical, doesn't matter. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'd incline to agree. I mean, from a technical perspective, you could, but then from a business value perspective, why would you want to do that? You're
Yeah,
already in that mode, and I'm already looking and establishing all my business services. Even if I'm manually doing all this, why am I not going to create one more record and then set up the relationships? And then I'm preserving the structure. I find that's one of my largest struggles is convincing the business why I need to have even just a placeholder business service offering and tie that. It's like, because then we can't expand on it. You know, we're painted ourselves into a corner, or we're building a foundation for our house that doesn't allow for future expansion without coming back and adjusting it. Oh, Greg, you disagree?
No.
Oh, okay. No, it's fine if you do. I'm wrong almost
That's
every
okay.
day. Okay, and Michael says great insight. So thank you for joining. Appreciate you coming out. Okay, I think we've gone through almost all of the questions. So are there any topics or anything else we'd like to revisit or new discussions we'd want to address?
I talked a little. I'm going to open this up to the panel. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's a very different, for me, it's a very different experience when you're walking into a customer who's just starting on their ServiceNow implementation versus someone who's been using ServiceNow for 5, 10, 15 years. So what if folks think about, and what have they found with a customer that's been on the platform for a really long time, and then they get wind of CSDM and they say, well, what should I do? How does that discussion, what does that discussion look like, and what kind of paths do you go down on that side?
Yeah, I think this is something that is, yeah, I think we have been getting a lot of requests, especially in the last maybe 1 year, I guess. One of the key, obviously, ServiceNow has a decent documentation on how to migrate into the CSD model. And look, it's not as easy as following the documentation and just turning on a few things, right? Obviously, there's a lot of communication that needs to be done. There's a lot of technical things. There's a lot of business buy-in that needs to happen. But in my personal experience, first, what we do is we do a bit of a analysis phase, maybe a week or two. We understand how many tables have been heavily used. A classic example is a lot of customers use the CMDB CI APPL table, the application table. But in the CSDM world, then we would actually use an application service, and you would have a business application on top of that, right? So these are the things that should sort of assess. And second most important thing is the lifecycle state and stage, right? Now that is something a lot of ServiceNow products, including ITOM, is more inclined to that, but we need to make sure that that migration is done, and even the status. ServiceNow has a lot of status fields: operation status, install status, and a lot of them. So what is a streamlined way of using the status, and if lifecycle stage and status is the right one to use, how do we start defining that? So generally what we do is we do a bit of a discovery phase. For the first few weeks, we understand how big the effort is and what the priorities are. And secondly, we come up with a sort of roadmap saying, okay, so phase one, let's do this. It could be just a crawl depending on how much the customer is, or it could be crawl, walk and run. But depending on how CMDB is established, we do that. But I think, to summarize that, it's we have seen if CMDB is heavily built already without the before the CSDM implementation, it's much more harder to transition. But if the CMDB is quite light on just a few tables and just a few data that's being used, then I think it's much more easier to do it.
I've worked with three kinds of customers. One, which are using CMDB and it's heavily customized and they are using it heavily. The second one is the customer who's been using ServiceNow for a long time, but their CMDB is not as mature. And the third kind of customer is who are starting net new. They have their CMDBs living in either third party applications or some Excel sheets. So it is easier to work with customers who have been using the ServiceNow platform, but not using the CMDB as it used to be, as it is used for, or it should be providing value. So it's good with them. The challenge comes with customers who are heavy on CMDB, but they are not inclined towards using it with CSDM. And we have to make them understand the value of it. But again, even if we explain them the value of it, where the bottom line comes to, where do they want to start? How do we establish the foundation for them? And that's a challenge, because some of my customers who are really pro at using CMDB, they have been asking me, okay, I am creating my business services manually, and then I'm relating them to all the services under that. So when you transform to the CSDM model, how are you, what approach are you going to take? And since they are pro on the platform, they are asking, is there a transform map which could do that? So I said, no, we have to sit down with you. We have to plan first your foundation stage, then the other stages, and then how to link all your CIs with those services. So it's kind of mixed, but it is really nice to work, to be working with the customers who know their CSDB and CMDB, and they can provide us how we can work with them to bring them on the CSDM model.
And I think one thing that's really important, that is an interesting tie between say a greenfield customer who's about to begin their journey and one who's been on the platform for 10 plus years who has a blown out CMDB. One conversation is exactly the same, and that is, who's going to be on your data governance team? Can we identify the people who are going to take responsibility? Who are your application owners who are going to, come forth and commit a monthly or quarterly time commitment to reviewing data and making sure that it's accurate? And I do think that, one of the key pieces of the entire journey that has to be established early is, who is the data governance team going to be? Get them on board, make them understand what's in it for them, all of the value that we've been talking about for this, entire time. Without that piece, a greenfield customer is going to end up in the exact same place as your legacy customer whose CMDB has been sliding sideways for years. So that conversation is consistent regardless of where the customer is in their journey.
Excellent. Okay, we've got a couple of new questions. Oh, Greg, did you?
I was just going to say, it's funny how, as the journey has gone, the question used to be, how do I do this? And now it's, why should I do this? And the answer is very different for us.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so we've got a couple other questions. So there are other ITSM tools. So why ServiceNow? And then also another one about, we move all apps to app services. So, that's kind of reductionary, but yeah, we'll get to it. So why would we use ServiceNow? And I'll grab a bit of this one. Is I like the platform because it spreads so wide and so far, and I can hit those weird edge cases that every business has. So every single company or organization out there has something strange that they need built, and the platform is flexible enough to handle that, including reaching out to external systems, waiting for information, pulling it back, and then taking specific actions. So that's why I say the advantage to ServiceNow is that it's all connected, and then they layer these products on top of it that help you even maximize more value out of that foundational element. And of course, we're focused on CMDB and CSDM here, so that's why we're talking more foundational data there. So any other comments
just
on
to
that?
piggyback on that, everything is on a single data model. You have a platform which gives you ITSM, which gives you legal, which gives you workplace delivery, which gives you HRSD, everything tied to a single data model. You do not have to struggle of, okay, this is my data model in my third party application, how do I integrate? And then again, struggle with your CMDB, which is already aligned with CSDM, but you still need to work on it. Now you can have all your processes in one single platform and a single data model. Makes things easy for you to implement, makes the decision easy for drivers who are paying from their pocket.
No, that's
Yeah,
great.
my experience with a couple of other tools is that you when you're working on other platforms, most of your work becomes the art of saying no because they're not flexible enough to handle what's being asked for. ServiceNow can handle almost everything, and that's one of the reasons I love working on it. That's my short answer.
It's great. Okay, let's move on to the next question. We got 9 minutes left, so we want to make sure we get through as many of these as we can. So, do we have any sample examples that cover all the components? There's plenty of content out there on YouTube specifically that breaks down all of these items with real world examples. Some use ServiceNow as a great example, and others use certain other tools like SAP. So I'd recommend going to the YouTube ServiceNow community channel, and you'll be able to see some of those videos there that break them down. And it goes through how I step clients through it. So it's not like it's like, here's that huge, image. We've all seen like all 4 domains and then foundation on the bottom, and everybody gets overwhelmed. I usually actually do snapshots or little chunks of that picture and build upon it. And I block out things like technical services. And I'm like, just get the application servicing. Why? Because that feeds your technical service offerings and your business service offerings, and it connects to your build stage. So that's kind of the connecting or the conduit for a record that you use. So I would recommend going through that, and you'll see those examples on it. We've got Kumar. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just trying to add. So there's also a few materials on the partner success portal for people who have access to that. So not just, again, we have ServiceNow examples, we have microservices as some of the examples, but a lot of industry vertical example is quite important to look at because it differs from industry. The model doesn't change, but the data does change, right? So, but yeah, I found a lot of good materials and collaterals in the partner success portal as well.
And there's also great content on Now Create. So for the audience, if you're not familiar, set up a Now Learning account. Anybody can do it. And there is Now Create within there that has thousands of assets that can be reviewed. Lots of great content on CMDB and CSDM.
Excellent. And we have a fellow CMA with us, Himanshu Kumar, who asks, have we seen, now that we've seen CSDM evolving outside infrastructure to industry verticals like telecom and financial industries, how do you see those implementations being successful?
Yeah, I think very similar to my previous comments. So a lot of people have, I think it could be either as an article or it could be officially by ServiceNow, but there are industry verticals on how we do CSDM. So for example, we did a CSDM implementation for an airport within Australia, which was totally different to another implementation that we did for a retail customer, right? Now, the only key difference there is understanding their processes. So the processes are one core thing that differs, and we can't use the same formula for different, also for all the industries. So again, I'm pretty sure it's in the partner success portal. We have industry-based CSDM recommendations that I remember seeing a couple of months back. And that's a great material, right? And that also describes how different industries differ in terms of the implementation, and secondly, what should you focus for each industries. So that would be my golden source that I've used in the past. And I'll try to find a link for that, and I can put that in the chat somewhere.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, I think we're down to our last discussion topic, which will be possibly out of topic, but we have databases in the CMDB, but there's a use case to bring some of those attributes or tables, columns, which are stored in another software like metadata to the CMDB. We do not have any layers below that CMDB data class. So do you just create a custom table, or do you just tag it? So how do we decide? I guess let me break that down a bit. How do we decide when to create a custom table in the CMDB and when not to?
Well, there's two decision points. One is what you're creating an actual CI, or is it just data about a CI? So if it's not an actual CI, I would tend to not create a new CI class to store that data. But as you know, you can create other tables that aren't extensions of CMDB and not CI classes that could store that data and connect to the CI that's in question. The other one is always, well, what is it going to cost me? CMDB is free to extend, at least up to a point. So that could also go into your decision making. I'm not going to say you should do the wrong thing because it's going to save you money, but it does factor in.
Yeah.
I also would just wonder, is ServiceNow the right place to store this data? You can do anything in ServiceNow and store any data you want in there, but I don't know that I have an answer to that. It's just something that I would think about before actually doing the work.
Yeah, I would agree. It's the value of that data. Is there going to be value that you're adding? What you plan to do with that data, and then per Greg's points, make some so take the time to review what is in place already, and you can make a decision from there.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
and that
just
brings us to that
touching on that.
Jurassic Park quote.
Yep.
Oh, let me do one more piece. Sorry, that brings us to that Jurassic Park quote about your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. So that really means, what is the value that we're going to get out of this, and does it outweigh the costs to implement and to maintain? And you factor in many things like licensing, implementation costs, all of those types of things when we're considering what we're going to do here. So go ahead.
Yep. So I recently did a project with the mainframes, and we had to get the mainframe data into ServiceNow. And now ServiceNow doesn't yet do a good job with all the mainframe classes and the subclasses beneath that. So this was for a particular customer, so we created those custom classes. But when we reached out to ServiceNow, ServiceNow was welcoming, and they said, okay, let us talk to you how we can incorporate these classes into the actual out of the box classes and put in those, so that the greater audience, all the customers who are using mainframes can take advantage of that. So if this is really driving value of creating the schema and certain tables, we should definitely talk to ServiceNow to include it out of the box.
Yep. And I also checked the store. Just earlier this year, I learned that there's a store app for CMDB that contains an API hierarchy. So now all of your API endpoints and all of the infrastructure underneath it, even down to like an individual API method. So you can get that granular. And now I'm not building custom stuff. I'm not extending the tables. I don't have to manage it. Somebody else has already done it. And guess what? They're going to update it for me. So I'm offloading that administrative effort and that the forward-thinking pieces as well. And of course, you can add a column here or there if you need to track a unique data point. But okay, well, I think that's all of the questions that we're going to take today. Thank you to everybody for joining us live, and thank you to the panel. So I hope everyone found it enjoyable, and I hope that you'll see us for the next episode. So we're also looking at doing this every first Friday that we have of the month. So I hope to see the panelists back for next time, and we look forward to it. So thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day and have an even better weekend. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Great discussion.